Hello, and thank you for coming. My name is Sarah Fearn. I work actually at Imperial College in London, and I'm not a glass artist or a farmer. I'm a scientist. I work in material science specifically. And my core technique is a thing called secondary ion mass spectrometry, where we use this technique for looking at composition of materials. And so this is this talk is really about how it all sort of began, because I started a postdoc back in 2001 at Imperial College, and it was in conjunction with the Victoria and Albert Museum, who have a very large glass collection. And it's very wonderful. I don't know if any of you have been there, and it's very lovely. And within that glass collection, back in 1991, they made an assessment of the materials that they have there, and they noticed that quite a high proportion of their objects were suffering from glass corrosion. So we've got an example of some of the objects that were suffering from this problem. So you've got this Venetian goblet, the pink one on the left-hand side, the German goblet in the middle, and English mold-blown glass on the right-hand side. So within the museum environment, some of their most precious artifacts have this issue with glass corrosion. And this is caused by what's known as the condensation evaporation, where moisture is just sitting on the humidity from the atmosphere that these objects are stored is just sitting on the surface of the objects, and it causes material to leach out of the glass, which then has ultimately can have a mechanical effect leading to failure. So it's a bit different to what you would see happening to a window, which would be condensation runoff, where you've got rainfall hitting the glass and can cause corrosion that way. So it's a very specific form of glass corrosion that's happening with stored objects in humid atmospheres. And so when you're looking at your glass objects, these are the stages that you will see happening during the corrosion process. So you have this foggy and dull surface first appearing on the surface, and it loses its brilliance and clarity. This object here should be nice and clear and transparent. The object can feel wet depending on because of the leachant that's coming out, potassium or sodium-based leachant, so it feels soapy to the touch. You then get these fine lines of cracks appearing through the object called crizzling. So you're structurally now, it's starting to disintegrate a little bit, and again, losing the brilliance of the original object. And these are electron microscope images when you're looking at the surface as it's starting to flake away, because the water goes in underneath, and it just causes the spalling effect on the surface of the material. And then you've obviously got mechanical failure at this point, and this leads to objects. So it's a bit of a grey image, but it's now fallen apart because the structure is now fundamentally broken. And all of this happens because of the composition of the glass. So very specific compositions that this happens to. So this is a composition triangle that was developed by a man called Roy Newton quite a long time ago. And on the axes, we've got on one side one that says silicon dioxide. So that's your main former of glass, silicon dioxide, this is the sand. On the bottom axis, you've got this one that's called RO, which is alkali earth metals, which are additives such as calcium, which would be calcium carbonates, maybe bones ground up and put to the sand, which helps to stabilize glass, is a good thing. And then on the left-hand side, we've got R2O, alkali metal oxides, such as your soda, lime, your potash. And these are really good fluxes because they reduce the melting point of your sand. So sand will melt at 1700 degrees Celsius. That's how you can get a glass. Or, you might have seen obsidian, high temperatures from volcanoes. But in order to work sand or glass, we need to lower the temperatures. And this is obviously quite important within the sustainability aspect, which I think Ian will probably talk about. So inadvertently, when people were historically making glasses, they added things to their sand to reduce that melting point. And they noticed that if they added things like the coastal plants, which is what the Venetians used, the Levantine materials, or in Northern Europe, they were using the bracken, what we see here, what we have around here, plant ashes from woods and plants. These things would lower the melting point of the material, so they could melt it. Or it also would change the viscosity, reduce softening temperatures, which means that you'd have working material. One of the disadvantages is if you add too much of the R2O, these soda potash-based fluxes, is that you affect the chemical durability, and it's the increased content of these, which is shown on the region here. So we've got this line, which shows us a region of stability, and everything to the left of that line, these glass compositions will be susceptible to humidity and corrosion. So when the V&A did the assessment back in 1991, looking at their collection, looking at the most at-risk objects, so this was carried out by Victoria Oakley, who is involved with the organisation as well. They found these very interesting compositions. So you can see this red line, these are the high soda-based glasses, and here we've got the high potassium-based glasses. So, and then here's your calcium oxide, which is known to be a stabilizer. So you can see on that green line, the amount of calcium oxide is quite low. And then we've got these two groups. So we have the Northern European, which are the high potash glasses, and the high soda lime glasses, which is your Venetian material. So my job in the postdoc was to look at the corrosion of these materials and try and prevent it or slow it down. So in order to do that, I need some material to work on. And obviously with the ethics within museums, I can't have a museum piece to work on, and it's already corroded. And previous studies, they've always made replica material, but what they've done is they've used chemical grade materials, melted very small batches, and then polished them away, because the analytical techniques that we use afterwards kind of require a nice flat surface to get good measurements. So this is not representative of what we're actually seeing aging in a museum. So I wanted to actually make a replica of a composition and actually get it blown so that we have what's known as the outer skin of the material. Because as a glass blower is working with an object that goes in and out of a glory hole, so the outer layer of the surface is slightly different to the bulk of the material, which means that the actual initial reaction that happens on the skin is really important. So we don't want to remove that, we need to see it. So I thought I need a glass furnace and a glass blower, and I'm at Imperial College in South Kensington, and across the road is the Royal College of Art, where Ian works. So I went over there and tried to convince him that this is what he needed to do. So I managed to convince him. So this is 2002 or 2003. And so using that failed object, I took the composition of the failed object that we can see here, this Façon de Venise glass. So the original composition is listed in the left-hand side. So we can see that there's a high soda content. And I was going to use that as my reference to make what we call replica gas 1, RG1 there. So that's already, I've made some RG1 and I've just checked the analytical composition of it, and we're pretty close to what I want it to be. So we first started making a very small glass batch with that aim, with that compositional aim. So I'm using sand from Loch Aline, which is a glassmaker's sand, very beautiful. It's got a high silica content, a very fine structure, and then just added in the various chemicals such as the soda, the potassium oxide, calcium oxide, to try and get that accurate composition. So we started off with a very small batch, and here is Ian 23 years ago. There we go. So this is at Imperial College in a very shoddy furnace room, and it doesn't look like this anymore. So we kind of made a bit of an ad hoc attempt at making replica glass in these conditions, rather than using the full RCA setup, probably quite rightly, which we'll get to in a minute. But this is a very small batch. So even in this very first attempt, we realized that the small batch isn't working properly. It's not melting properly. The heat isn't getting into the melt properly. We've actually got to scale it up. So the batch is too small. It's not refining properly. We can't really get to do what we want to do, and there was no space, poor working conditions. So we decided to scale up to 25 kilogram batches, and we're going to try and do two compositions now, one with a high soda lime and one with a high potash content. So there we've got replica glass 1 and replica glass 3. So we start off foolishly, I don't know why we've started with replica glass 3, we start with a high potash one. And we've got crucibles, so it's all mixed up in a cement mixer to get very good contact over the sand, and we start melting the batch over in the RCA. So there's the heating sequence, up to 700 degrees C, everything was looking all right, and then 30 degrees up to 1200, and then the crucible fails. So this is in the furnace of the Royal College of Art. So now, if anybody knows it, Ian, he's panicking. Because this could mean that a lot of students don't now get any work done, because we may have actually destroyed a furnace, because you can see that there's quite extensive damage to that crucible. It's glazed up, but I think maybe, I don't know, you're going to talk a little bit about this? So
it's damaged the pot. It's not really damaged the furnace at all.
So we move on, and Ian's happy to do another day. So we go on to replica glass 1, and this is now the high soda lime glass, and we go on and do the same heating schedule, and this time it works, which is very good. So now he then produces a series of flat plates for me to work on and put into aging cabinets to do the corrosion experiments. But what came out of this was Ian's experience of working with a glass that has been made from the very essence of what it is, the sand, the additives, a different formula that he was completely not used to working with. So these are the very quick objects that he made, and he was absolutely astounded by the workability of the glass. And he wrote a very nice little essay about what he found working with glass, which I'm going to read one of the first paragraph out, and I don't know whether any of these things are being handed out, hopefully forwarded. But so the glass itself was a revelation. I've always accepted that skill has been lost over time and that it would be impossible for me to achieve the skill needed to produce the fine quality that can be found in the glass collection of the V&A. I now believe that the Italian glassmakers became so expert purely based on the incredible material with which they worked. So he's throwing shade on Venetian glass workers. There we go, very good. So, but it was a really interesting insight into the aspects of the material that he's working with, which at this point meant Ian has now caught the bug. So having worked with this replica glass, it's got Ian thinking about, well, glass is a recyclable material. So using old principles of glass making, such as adding plant ashes, why don't we do that to extend the lifetime of waste glass, adding in the plant ashes to recycle the waste glass again? And so this is what, over the 20-year period, we've done some other experiments since, and I've looked at compositions for him, but this has now led to the creation of the Upcycling Glass Company, with the development of the studio, which you've seen up just outside, with his developed furnace. And then just the other week, well, just at the end of the summer, we then tried to do what we were aiming to do at the very beginning. We took some window glass as the cullet, just waste window glass, smash that up. For our flux, the additives, we used the ashes from the biomass on Brimpts Farm. So it's already been burnt, so we don't have to burn any further plant ashes. That's already there. We're not adding to any more burning process. And we melted that all down, and we blew some objects. So so I called it Wonder Glass. Here's Ian gathering the melt and also dropping it onto the slab to work. And it was successful. So we have these objects produced. They're in the annealing cupboard at the moment. So my side of it is to say, well, hang on a minute, what have we done here? Have we actually changed the glass, the window glass? Is there any toxicity in the biomass ash? So we've just had a look at the composition of, so the key is, WG is the Wonder Glass. That's the material that we made, which is not on display here, but I think up in the studio. So that's the Wonder Glass that we made in the orange. The ash that we added is in the blue, and the glass is in the green. And then I also just analysed a reference glass. It's just a glass microscope slide, which is fundamentally a soda lime glass, just very basic. And so from these plots, you can see that the calcium is very high in the ash, and it is now higher in the Wonder Glass. So it has taken on the calcium, which is a former, which will lower the melting temperature of the glass. So that's really good. We can see that the silicon is there, but it's not too high compared to what you have in the window glass and the reference glass, which would be basically the same composition. So that would lower the melting temperature, which means that you can work it. There's some potash in the plant ashes, as you'd expect, from under here, the potassium, which has gone into the glass, because we can see we've got it here compared to the cullet. There's no potash in the cullet. So we have moved, stuff has gone from the ash into the mix, and the two materials have combined. If we look a little bit further along the periodic table, some other elements, we can see that the ash had quite a high content of the iron with the Fe there, which is now represented in the new glass as well. Interestingly, a bit of strontium here, on the ash, and quite a bit of manganese as well. And for the last 4 elemental species, we can see that there are things that were only in the ash which are now in the wonder glass that we've created. So there's definitely been an effect of these. These have definitely worked together and mixed, and we've been able to recycle the waste glass. And this is what Ian produced. So it's been successful. We've been able to show that we can mix these things together and extend the longevity of maybe waste glass, particularly window glass that is just thrown away, using ash from the biomass, which is readily there. As Andy pointed out, it's got quite a lot of it to get rid of. So the glass melt could be used to blow very beautiful objects. This is just 1 day's work, so quite stunning, really. And obviously, adding different additives to this, we could decolorize it or change the colour. And so that's been my involvement with the project so far, and I shall now hand you over to Ian to continue.